Imperialism stemmed from manifest destiny. Manifest destiny took place during the 1800s when Americans were expanding westward through North America. We believed that it was our God-given right to expand and take over land. However, when we reached California, we weren't quite ready to give up our manifest destiny mindsets. So where did we turn? Overseas. In American eyes, we were extending the blessing of Americanness to other countries, making them more westernized and civilized. In turn, we would reap the benefits of having land overseas, a broader market, and a booming economy. Our essential questions were: 1. What standards should be used to determine right and wrong in American imperialism? And 2. How did imperialism serve the interests of American citizens, and did the US government, in doing this, act decently in the world? Imperialism was justified in three ways: economically, socially, and politically. In terms of the time period, imperialism began when the US economy was booming. Going international increased customers, and thus increased demand. This equated to more jobs and more money flowing throughout the American economy. It increased the middle class and kept prices reasonable in America. This also led to economic stability and an increased sense of national pride. Socially, there was social Darwinism, which was the belief that Americans were better than other countries. The US believed that taking over other countries would be beneficial to them. Americans felt the obligation to help the poor souls of those living overseas and wanted to convert them to Christianity. Politically, America was slowly rising to superpower status. All superpower nations were very imperialistic and felt it was what they needed to become one. This comes from the idea of keeping up with the Joneses and taking your piece of the international pie. In addition, having colonies would allow the US to have ports, which would allow them to build up a navy to match up with the British. However, imperialism wasn't a positive for all Americans. For one, it was expensive. It costed a lot of money to obtain and maintain colonies, along with keeping a large navy. Some saw it as un-American and asked themselves, why would the land of the free take over other countries into bondage? They saw imperialism as American hypocrisy. Some saw it as just morally wrong. Others thought if imperialism was only a way to expand the market, there were other solutions rather than going overseas. But whatever the case, imperialism went ahead and happened anyway.
One example of American imperialism was the United States annexation of the Kingdom of Hawaii. The annexation of Hawaii would be considered formal imperialism because there was a physical presence of the mother country both politically and militarily. King Kalakaua ruled from 1874 till 1891, and by that time, Westerners had already made a big impact in the islands. The Europeans wanted to trade with the Hawaiians and use the plentiful, fertile land to grow sugarcane. However, Kalakaua wanted to preserve Hawaiian culture, and thus made European-Hawaiian trade difficult. Since Kalakaua refused to trade with the Europeans, they deemed Kalakaua unreliable, anti-American, and dishonest, and then forced him to sign a new constitution that limited his power, gave white plantation owners lots of power, and took rights away from Hawaiians. This was called the Bayonet Constitution, because Kalakaua was forced by the Americans to sign the Constitution. This resulted in Europeans controlling most of the land. When Kalakaua died, his sister, Queen Liliuokalani, assumed power, and she ruled from 1891 until 1917. She attempted to return rule to the Hawaiian people, but powerful American men took advantage over her, and on January 16 through 18, 1893, overthrew her and put her in prison. On February 1, 1893, John Stevens, the U.S. Minister to Hawaii, declared Hawaii a protectorate of the U.S. The U.S. government did not approve of this, as President Grover Cleveland stopped the treaty and ordered Liliuokalani back to the throne. However, Cleveland's successor, President William McKinley, wanted to annex Hawaii. The Hawaiian people were very upset about this and signed many petitions to try to prevent the annexation. While they were temporarily successful, in the long run they failed and Hawaii became a part of the United States. From 1900 to 1959, Hawaii was a territory, and on August 21, 1959, Hawaii became a state, despite a lot of opposition. The annexation of Hawaii is one example of American imperialism. Some other examples of American imperialism include the Philippines, Cuba, and Puerto Rico.
After the Spanish-American War, the US annexed the Philippines and took control over there. The Filipino people tried to rebel against the new government, but the American military destroyed them. President McKinley argued that the US had a responsibility to uplift and civilize the Filipino people, and argued that spreading Christianity justified the annexation of the Philippines. Cuba also had a similar story. After the Spanish-American War, Cuba was freed from harsh Spanish rule, but was then ruled by the US government. While they were granted independence through the Platt Amendment, the US maintained presence in Cuba to protect its own economic and military interests. This is a type of informal imperialism because the people of Cuba were allowed to rule themselves, but the US maintained influence there to promote its own military, social, and political standings.
Puerto Rico is another example of formal imperialism. It was controlled by the US government until 1900. The US built Puerto Rican infrastructure and education. The Foraker Act of 1900 removed military control and established a civil government there. While the US slowly cedes more freedom to Puerto Rico, the US government still remains executive control over their government. The annexation of Puerto Rico was also justified by Americans who wanted to spread Christianity there. Iran has a bit of a different story. Iran's story happened more recently, so it is technically not called imperialism, but when looked at the real basis of what happened, it really does seem like imperialism. Here's what happened. In 1953, Iran attempted to nationalize their oil industry to bring more money into their economy. However, the CIA and British government created a plan to overthrow the Iranian democratically elected president and put the Shah back in power because the Shah was more sympathetic toward American interests. However, the Shah was a brutal dictator, and the Iranian people suffered. Thus, in 1979, the Iranians tried to overthrow the Shah and succeeded, even though the US tried to stop it. While this is technically not imperialism, it happened too recently. The actions all showed that Americans hadn't yet, and perhaps still haven't yet, completely given up an imperialistic mindset.
So imperialism happened. Was it right or was it wrong? This question is a question that Americans have to ask themselves. We can't just go blindly out and say that our nation is the greatest. We have made many mistakes. We can determine right versus wrong on how we treat the people of the country and if we left them in a better place afterwards or a worse place. We need to examine far into the future what effects things will have. I think that if the outcome is a strengthened relationship in terms of trade and diplomacy, it is most likely right. However, we also have to be aware that if we are only benefiting and the other country is suffering, something is wrong.
We can also look at the morality of imperialism through the eyes of our Constitution. The Constitution is like a mission statement for our country. The preamble of the Constitution states, "We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America." From this, we can see that the purposes of government from the very beginning were to 1. Create a just legal system, 2. Keep the homeland safe, 3. Promote general welfare, and 4. Secure the blessings of liberty. Imperialism deals with all 4 of these topics. We can see that imperialism keeps the homeland safe by helping to build a stronger navy by establishing more ports. This is good for the country. It also promotes general welfare because by having colonies, we have more people, and more people means more consumers to buy the products we're producing. That means more Americans can be employed, and that is good for both the people and for the economy. This also helps to secure the blessings of liberty by keeping a peaceful country, because people are content with where they are and how they are living. Thus, imperialism fulfills 3 of the 4 main purposes of the US government, which seems pretty good. However, it also drastically contradicts the first. The first purpose stated in the preamble of the Constitution is to establish justice. America is a country founded on the basis of freedom for all. While this imperialistic movement did not revoke justice from anybody in the homeland, it was very contradictory to what America was all about. America, the land of the free, went to other countries and basically demanded that they do things for the benefit of American politics, social life, and economy. This is exactly what the Founding Fathers did not want when they founded the country. Thus, the U.S. government should try to serve the interests of its citizens in the homeland and act decently in the world by applying the Constitution to its foreign policy and examining a number of things, including 1. Whether or not the action we take is constitutional, 2. examining the possible effects an action could have on both our country and the other country. And 3, how this action will be seen by the rest of the world and what kind of picture it will paint of America. Thus, we conclude that imperialism was a mistake on the side of the American government and was morally wrong. While it did benefit Americans economically, it oftentimes caused a lot of social and sometimes even political and economic harm to the countries we took over. While there is nothing we can do about the past to fix what has already happened, we can take imperialism as a lesson and learn to 1. Look at our government with some skepticism, question if our government is doing right or wrong. 2. Look at the potential costs and benefits of what will happen, compare that to our Constitution. And 3. See if those actions will make America respected or a giant hypocrite before making major foreign policy decisions.